Ever scroll through social media and just end up feeling like you're constantly falling behind?
Yeah.
Like everyone else is living on this like permanent highlight reel,
Right.
and you're stuck hitting like replay on your own everyday struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're not alone, if that sounds familiar.
Nope.
Today, we're diving deep into the pervasive and oftentimes kind of sneaky world of social comparison.
Yes.
We're going to unpack why we compare ourselves to others, why it makes us feel so crummy,
Yeah.
and most importantly,
Yeah.
how to break free from that cycle.
Absolutely. And you know what's so interesting about this whole comparison game is that it's not like some modern day invention.
Right.
It's actually like deeply rooted in our evolution.
Okay, so are we talking like cave people stressing over who had the best cave paintings?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
But think about it this way. For our ancestors, social comparison,
Yeah.
that was vital for survival.
Really?
They were constantly like sizing each other up to assess threats, to find potential mates, to figure out where they fit into, the social hierarchy.
Okay.
Back then, it wasn't so much about keeping up with the Joneses. It was more about like keeping up to stay alive.
So basically, comparing helped them avoid becoming like a saber-toothed tiger's lunch.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how did this like survival mechanism turn into the source of so much self-doubt in, today's world?
Well, because the things we're comparing ourselves to have like drastically changed.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. We are bombarded with images and stories, right?
Right.
And they're all so carefully curated
Yeah.
to portray this like often unrealistic version of success and happiness.
Yeah, it's true. It's like everyone else is living in a perfectly filtered Instagram story.
Yes.
And we're like stuck with the raw, unedited footage of our own lives.
And that's exactly where the trouble begins, right?
Right.
Our brains haven't quite like caught up to this deluge of perfection that we're seeing.
Right.
So we see these, curated lives and we instinctively measure ourselves against them.
Yeah.
Even though like logically we know it's not the full picture.
Right.
You know?
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like our ancient brains are like freaking out about fitting in, but they're getting tricked by all the smoke and mirrors of, the modern world.
Exactly. And so we fall into what psychologists call upward social comparison,
Okay.
which is where we're comparing ourselves to those we perceive as being better off.
Right.
And then that leads to those feelings of inadequacy.
But haven't you also heard the saying, comparison is the thief of joy?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so true. But how do we like stop it from stealing ours?
Yeah. Well, one really powerful strategy is to just remember that you're only seeing a tiny sliver of other people's lives.
Okay.
It's like looking at a highlight reel.
Right.
You're not seeing the behind-the-scenes struggles, the doubts, the insecurities, all of that.
It's like that saying, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides.
Yes, exactly.
Easier said than done, though, right? Absolutely. But there are some practical ways to shift your perspective.
Okay.
And I think this is a good time to maybe talk about that study that you mentioned from the Journal of Social Psychology.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The one that found a link between social media comparison and like increased anxiety and depression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it highlights how these comparisons, they can actually activate our brain's negativity bias,
okay.
which then makes us dwell on what we lack rather than appreciating what we already have.
Yeah.
And so this like constant focus on our perceived shortcomings can then send us into this spiral of self-doubt.
Yeah. So how do we break free from this like negativity bias? It feels like, especially online, we're constantly bombarded with these opportunities to compare ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Social media can definitely be like a breeding ground for comparison.
Right.
But here's the thing. You actually have a lot more control than you might think.
Yeah.
One of the most effective ways to like combat this is by cultivating gratitude.
Okay, I've heard about like gratitude journals and all that, but how does simply like listing things you're thankful for actually help with those like icky feelings of comparison?
Well, it's not just about like, listing things, right?
Right.
It's about actively shifting your focus. So when you engage in genuine gratitude,
Yeah.
you're essentially like rewiring your brain to notice and appreciate the good that's already in your life.
Okay.
And then this helps to kind of counterbalance that negativity bias that we were talking about, right?
Sure.
So it makes you less susceptible to those like feelings of not enough
Right.
that often stem from comparing yourself to others.
So it's like gratitude is a muscle that you can strengthen.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like the more you use it, the easier it becomes to focus on like the positive aspects of your own life, even when you're like tempted to compare yourself to others?
Precisely. And, there's like fascinating research that actually supports this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Studies have shown that practicing gratitude can lead to increased levels of happiness,
Wow.
life satisfaction,
Okay.
and even improved physical health.
Wow. I had no idea it went that deep.
Yeah.
So it's not just about feeling good in the moment.
Right.
It's about like creating this more positive and like resilient mindset over time.
Precisely. And that shift in mindset can be incredibly powerful
Yeah.
when it comes to, breaking free from that comparison trap.
Okay.
Because instead of focusing on what you lack,
Yeah.
you start to appreciate what you have,
Right.
which makes those kind of like external measures of success and happiness
Yeah.
less important.
It's like you're less likely to covet your friend's like fancy new car when you're feeling grateful for the reliable one that you have that gets you where you need to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that actually brings us to another important point, which
Right.
is being mindful of your social media consumption.
Yeah. I mean, we can't really talk about comparison without, addressing the elephant in the room.
Exactly.
But how can we still enjoy like those platforms without getting like sucked into the comparison game?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really about being intentional, right?
Okay.
So think of your social media feed as a garden.
Okay.
You wouldn't just let any plant grow there, would you?
Right.
You would choose the plants that bring you joy and beauty and nourishment.
Yeah.
The same principle applies online.
Okay.
You have the power to curate your feed,
Okay.
to choose who and what you're allowing into your like digital space.
So it's about being like more selective about who you follow.
Yeah.
And like what content you engage with. And
Exactly.
like, hitting that unfollow button on those accounts
Yeah.
that like consistently leave you feeling inadequate or like envious.
Precisely. Like if certain accounts, every time you see their posts,
Yeah.
it triggers like those feelings of comparison or
Yeah.
self-doubt. It's totally okay to hit that unfollow or mute button.
Yeah.
You're not being rude. You're simply prioritizing your own mental well-being.
I love that. It's like giving yourself permission to create like a more positive
Yes.
and like supportive online environment for yourself.
Exactly. And it's not just about what you subtract from your feed.
Right.
It's also about what you're adding to it.
Okay.
Seek out accounts that inspire you,
Yeah.
that uplift you,
Ah.
and that align with your values.
Okay. So instead of comparing ourselves to others, we can actually like use social media as a tool to connect with people who share our interests,
Yeah.
celebrate our like achievements, and like even inspire us to become better versions of ourselves.
Absolutely. It's about shifting your mindset from comparison to connection,
Okay.
from envy to inspiration.
Okay. This is all like great advice.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, even when we like know the dangers of comparison,
Right.
and even if we're being mindful of our social media use, there are still going to be those times when those feelings of like self-doubt creep in.
Yeah.
So what do we do then?
Well, that's where self-compassion comes in. It's
Okay.
about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding
Yeah.
that you would offer to like a close friend who's struggling.
Yeah. So instead of like beating ourselves up for feeling inadequate,
Mm-hmm.
we can like acknowledge those feelings without judgment
Exactly.
and remind ourselves that like, hey, everyone feels this way sometimes.
Dax, it's about recognizing that you're human
Yeah.
and you're not expected to be perfect.
Right.
Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, their own unique journey.
Yeah.
And just because someone else is like excelling in one area,
Right.
it doesn't mean that you're not valuable
Yeah.
and worthy in countless other ways.
That's such an important reminder.
Yeah.
So easy to get caught up in that like all or nothing thinking.
Right.
Like if we're not the absolute best at something, then like we're a failure.
Yeah. It's a common trap, but it's definitely one that we can challenge
Okay.
by kind of shifting our focus from comparison to self-acceptance.
Okay.
And remembering that, your worth isn't determined by external achievements or how you stack up against others.
So it's about recognizing and like valuing our own unique strengths and contributions, even if they don't always get like the same recognition as someone else's.
Absolutely. And, it's also about embracing our imperfections.
Okay.
Those quirks and vulnerabilities that make us human. Because
Yeah.
honestly, those imperfections are often what make us interesting and relatable and even, lovable.
I love that. Okay. So we've talked about gratitude, mindful social media use, self-compassion. What else can we do to kind of quiet that inner critic that just loves to compare?
Well, one really powerful strategy is to kind of shift your focus from what you haven't accomplished to what
Ah,
you have.
okay.
Celebrate your wins, big and small.
Yeah, it's like giving yourself permission to like acknowledge and enjoy your own successes instead of downplaying them or comparing them to, what other people are doing.
Exactly. So, did you hit a personal goal at the gym this week?
Yeah.
Did you finally finish that project you've been working on?
Hmm.
Did you cook a delicious meal from scratch? Like take a moment to just savor those
Yeah,
victories.
those little wins can feel even bigger when you actually like let yourself celebrate them, right?
Absolutely. And again, it's not about like seeking validation from others. It's
Hmm.
about like you recognizing your own efforts and your own progress
Okay.
and realizing that like each small win is a step forward on your own unique path.
So instead of getting caught up in that keeping up with the Joneses mentality,
Yes,
we can kind of focus on creating our own definition of success,
exactly.
one that's like based on our own values and aspirations.
Precisely. It's about like, defining what matters to you
Yeah.
and then celebrating your progress along the way. Because ultimately, like the most fulfilling journey is the one that aligns with your own authentic self, not, someone else's version of success.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It feels really empowering to like have these strategies to kind of combat those like negative comparison
Oh,
spirals.
I'm so glad to hear that. And, just remember that like breaking free from the comparison trap, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
It takes practice and conscious effort to kind of shift your mindset,
Yeah.
but the rewards are so worth it.
So true. Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of social comparison.
Yes.
Um, any kind of final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Just this. Be kind to yourself.
Okay.
Remember that everyone is fighting their own battles, navigating their own unique set of challenges.
Yeah.
So, the next time that you find yourself comparing yourself to others, just take a deep breath, acknowledge those feelings,
Hmm.
and then, like, gently redirect your focus back to your own journey. Celebrate your progress, embrace your imperfections,
Yeah.
and just remember that you are enough, just as you are.
Beautifully said. And that is a wrap on another insightful deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep reminding yourself that you are absolutely, positively, 100% worthy and capable of creating a life you love, comparison-free.